EECS Colloquium of the new year. And it's a great pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Lars Rasmussen, back to Berkeley. He graduated from here with his PhD in 1998, and since then has gone on to great things, some of which he's going to tell us about today. He also, his achievements are so great, he's receiving today the Distinguished Alumnus Award from our department, which is a great honor, and very well deserved. And, you know, there's no free lunch, so he's also going to give a talk when receiving the award. So just by way of introduction, just a few words about Lars. Back in the 90s, I was fortunate enough to be his PhD advisor, and so it was really hard to keep up with Lars. So in addition to coming up with great algorithmic results, including one beautiful algorithm I still teach in graduate classes, you know, he was equally likely to be found on top of a mountain at a Buddhist retreat in Eastern Europe, organizing agricultural workers in the Central Valley, on the dance floor doing ballroom dancing, Latin dancing, skiing. And anyone who knows Lars, you know, will know that whatever he does to a very, very high standard. So all of this stuff he was doing with great passion and spectacular results. So at some point I said to him, well, Lars, you know, this is all great, but maybe it'd be good if you finished your PhD. And Lars said, yeah, well, maybe that is a good idea. So a couple of months later, he delivered a beautifully written thesis and graduated and then moved on. And he moved on to many things. So very briefly, first thing he did was he joined, as a chief engineer, he joined Mike Luby's company Digital Fountain, a startup doing breakthrough work on fountain codes. And then he and his brother, Jens, started a company called Where2 Technologies, which was acquired by Google and became Google Maps, which I'm sure needs no introduction. He then continued at Google. He was a founder of a Google Wave project, which was, I guess, a platform that's so far ahead of its time that Google had to nix it because it was too much competition for other platforms inside Google. He was then recruited by Mark Zuckerberg to work on the first search effort at Facebook. And after that, in his most recent incarnation, he's gone back to the startup world, and he is an angel investor and a co-founder of various innovative new companies. Some of that he's going to tell us about today. So that's enough from me. So to present the Distinguished Alumnus Award, I guess our chair, Claire Tomlin, is going to do the honors. Yeah.
Thank you, Alistair. So as Alistair said, this is our one of our most distinguished awards. The word distinguished, it's an award that it really comes from the faculty in the department, in that every year we ask the faculty broadly for nominations of alumni who have, you know, done one of their degrees here and gone on to great things. And we have a committee of faculty. I'm not on it, but that committee reviews all of the nominations, and lots of discussion, lots of getting additional information, and then there's a decision made. And for the 2023-24 year, Lars Rasmussen was named the Distinguished Alumnus in Computer Science, which is a great honor. And he wasn't able to come to our ceremony in the spring because he was celebrating the Greek Orthodox Easter with his family. And we invited him to come and give a seminar. And so here he is, and it's a great pleasure to present this award to Lars Rasmussen.
Thank you so much.
photos. Congratulations, Lars.
Thank you.
It's wonderful that you're here.
Blue. It's my favorite color. Well, thank you for the award, for coming. I get super nervous about talks, but when there is an empty chair, I'm always like, did they use Google Maps? Were they trying to find it? Did I get them lost? I always like, it's really quite an honor. And does anyone here suffer from imposter syndrome? No, that's probably just me, right? Because I have this like recurring dream that I get called back to UC Berkeley, and then right before this happens, they discover that I never graduated from high school, and that invalidates all the other degrees, right? And then I have to go. This is a dream I have, right? And then I have to go back to high school, and then I continuously, for the rest of the dream, fail to graduate from high school and wake up. Anyway, I don't know why I shared that. I don't have imposter syndrome. I'm genuinely incompetent. It's not something I'm looking at. So I do have, I suppose, a weakness for working on ambitious things, and as a result, to be perfectly honest, most of the things I work on end up looking like a big old shipwreck. But when I give talks, I talk about the exceptions, of course, to this rule, although there may be more lessons to be learned from my shipwrecks. But the two things I get to talk about on this very flattering day here is that I helped create Google Maps with my brother almost 20 years ago. It's actually almost exactly 20 years ago we sold our company to Google, and 19 years ago since we launched it. And then 10 years later, as an angel investor, I helped start Canva. I hope you can see the meta here that I invested in the company I used to make this presentation here. But to go back to the beginning, I was born and raised in Denmark, a beautiful country to live in, unless you like sun. And after getting my first degree from the University of Aarhus, and mostly in math with a little bit of computer science, I moved to Edinburgh, where I met Alistair, who was my advisor back then, did a master's degree in Scotland. It's also where I met my Greek goddess wife, who's here in orange. We created my Greek-Danish princess daughter over here, who brought me my safety blanket, without which I can't give talks. And after, well, actually a fun little story, I actually started doing a PhD in Scotland. I took a year out, mostly to pursue LO in Greece. And I came back to start a PhD in Scotland, and Alistair was going to be my advisor. But by then, Alistair had moved to America to do a sabbatical, invited me over for a week, I think, here in Berkeley, and disclosed that he was considering taking a job here, and if so, would I want to join? And that's exactly what happened. This is actually how I got into UC Berkeley, through the back door. Alistair offered me a free seat, so I didn't have to go through any. This is probably how they missed that I didn't graduate from high school. Just kidding, just a dream. And so I wrote this here, reproduced from microfilm. This is my PhD thesis, 1998. It's about approximating the permanent and other short P complete problems. I have this in hard copy in my house, and every now and then I kind of open it and I read it, and I have the following interesting experience, that I remember writing every single word in there, and I no longer understand what they mean, which I'm sure I could, but another kind of strange set of feelings I had about this incredible award that you're giving me here, that I always kind of felt like, don't take this the wrong way, I always kind of felt like I wasn't quite good enough to have an impact in theory, and that's kind of part of why I went and did all this other stuff that I'm tremendously proud of. But there is also a part of me that wish I had stayed with this sort of stuff. And maybe, well, I'm not that old, so who knows. I live in Greece now. Greek goddess wife is my ticket to this beautiful country. You should all come visit in the summer. It's an amazing place with a surprisingly vibrant startup community, amazing universities. And back to the story of Lars entering startup land. So I graduated, this is the NASDAQ Composite Stock Index that tracks technology stock in particular. And this was one of the most spectacular stock market crashes ever. We're back in the late 90s, the dot-com bubble. Everything was super frothy, and a lot of academics, or a fair number of academics, were leaving academia, doing startups, and some of them being quite successful. And right when I graduated, right there, Mike Luby, a dear friend of mine, was starting a company called Digital Fountain, which had the most amazing, breathtakingly, truly magic, I can't believe it's true, technology in the space of forward error correction. And I was supremely lucky, I think, to graduate right there. And even though I was in theory, I had some programming gigs on the side to fund my studies. And so I claimed I knew how to program, and tricked Mike into hiring me as his first engineer. And this was really my first experience with startups. And we raised more than 40 million. We were, yes, over like 4 or 5 rounds. We were very good at demos, but but one of the things, so this ended up getting sold to Qualcomm, and I think in a lot of the technologies we use every day, Mike's error correcting codes are embedded in there. But one of the things that happened was that because things were so frothy and all this money was being put into the company, Mike, you'll nod or shake your head if you agree with this analysis, but investors were like really pushing us to not just license this amazing technology to the hundreds of thousands of places where it would make a meaningful difference, but instead we were going to build a single product that had these 2 properties. Number one, it should only be possible to build with this particular magical technology, and then it should have billions and billions of dollars of potential revenue in it. And we really tried in earnest to find that product, and I would argue we didn't quite succeed, and then this happened. Right, so the stock market crashed spectacularly. Like this is an 80% drop of the stock market index, right? And you can see that it took like 15 years to recover. Like we're talking serious downturn. Even though I think we actually like raised 20 million after this crash happened, money really did dry up, and the company had to start laying off people. I had, by the way, recruited my brother. He's a couple years older than me, and whereas I have this amazing PhD from one of the top schools in the world, he's a college dropout. And he's really the one with the playful, out-of-the-box mind. He has a startup idea every week. Unfortunately, only one younger brother to help him execute on those ideas. Often complain to mom about this. But I had persuaded him to come join Mike's company. And when we both got laid off at around the same time, I think actually he a few months before me, and when I got my predictable notice, he called me up and he said this. He's very terse, my brother. He said, like he had dusted off all his ideas and he found the one where a small team could have a big impact because no one was investing right now. And he said, let's make mapping online bigger, faster, and prettier. It was kind of like a page-long pitch to me. He also described some very basic, simple technological ideas to make this happen. So back then, MapQuest, everyone remembers MapQuest, right? Okay, maybe not everyone, this is a long time ago, but MapQuest was the leading map site on the internet at the time. They had really been the pioneer. And the conversation started like this. My brother was like, maps online suck. And I, the well-educated PhD, was like, well, it's not that bad. I mean, it's like I use it 3 or 4 times a month. You print out these directions, you get where you want to go. It's not that bad. But he said we can do it much better. And back then, MapQuest was this web page with a bunch of text and a little hard-to-read map. And if you wanted to see a different map, you had to push a button, and the whole page would like reload, and it would take a long time. And my brother had this idea that if we made the map take up the whole screen and be faster and prettier, he's actually also a very good designer. One of our proudest things in our family is that in the Modern Museum of Art in New York, the maps marker that he designed, the teardrop-shaped maps marker, is in their permanent collection. And he's particularly proud of that because the architecture school in Denmark rejected his applications 3 years in a row. And he showed them. He gave me this pitch. When I tell this story, I was immediately sold. When he tells the story, it took me days to realize his genius. But we set out to build this thing, and it was just the 2 of us. And there was no money, because we were going to be rich from Mike's genius. And so we hadn't saved up any money at all. And so we set out to do this. We rented a house in Berkeley with a bunch of other friends. A couple of startups actually came out of that house. And we started building, and 6 months into it, we thought we had a pretty neat demo. And we went and we crashed like a panel discussion about how things sucked at that point in startup because no one was investing. Because one of the members of the panel had been on Mike's board and was one of the partners that, you remember Frank Marshall? Yeah, so he was on the panel, and we had met him like once, and we thought he'll remember us, right? And so we crashed the party. We didn't have money for the entrance ticket. We crashed it. We rocked up to Frank afterwards, and we got time with him to show the demo. And this turned out to be super important. Like, lots of people turned us down. There are all kinds of reasons why what we're doing was not good. But when you look back at every person that ever did anything positive for us, it all started with an introduction from Frank. And so here's my introduction tree, right? Including, this is Larry Page, one of the Google founders, was an introduction from someone, and back to Frank. And so often now I advise young people in the startups, and I always tell them to find their Frank. Of course, in fact, I aspire to be the Frank. Sometimes I'm, more like Ram or somewhere down here, but almost always successful startups have a tree like this, where it's that one first person that you get to believe in what you do that makes everything else happen. And so Frank started by introducing us to maybe 4 or 5 VCs here in California on Sand Hill Road. And we did our demo, we thought it was really good, and we got 0 callbacks. Like, no one even called us back to say that we sucked. It was just like silence. And at that point, this is kind of the first real experience of this sort of roller coaster life that you have to live in startup land that we're gone from. We found someone who liked us too, like no one loves us. And at this point, I have to be honest, I sometimes give talks about not giving up. And at this point in time, we were giving up, to be honest. Like, we had no money, we were broke, everything was in dumps. And to be perfectly honest, the only reason we didn't is that no one was going to hire us. Like, we actually went and applied for jobs, but no one was hiring. And so we're like, well, we might as well continue. And then a surprising break happened. So we'd also tried to get friends to work with us, but we didn't have money to pay for it. And that was tricky. And then Digital Fountain happened to have had an office in Sydney, Australia, because it was built back when it was hard to hire here in California. And 2 of the guys there, actually one of the guys plus a mate, they were willing to work for us. I think one was like working in a gas station, and the other one in his dad's clothes cutting factory. And they were willing to work for us, so we flew to Australia, a very beautiful country, on the cheapest tickets we could find. We spent another 6 months, the 4 of us in a spare bedroom, building a better prototype. And then when the demo was a little better and things had kind of calmed down from the crash, we flew back to California, and we knocked on Frank's door again. And we're like, look, we have a better demo. And he said, that is indeed better. And then he opened another 5 doors for us on Sand Hill Road. And an interesting observation here was that these were actually like bigger VCs, right? So VCs, you can rank them in big dog down to not so big dogs. And these were the big dogs now. And so clearly part of that first round was Frank testing whether we can show up at a VCs and not make complete fools of ourselves, right? And even though they hadn't called us back, he had clearly checked that we passed that test. And now we got into the bigger players. We did 5 demos again, and this time one of them called us back. And they were really like one of the big players. So like there was a company, a VC, that had helped start Google, Apple, Yahoo, massive player back then, even bigger today. And they called us back. They had this famous model. They had like 12 partners, and you had to persuade each of them. You could only get an investment if they had consensus. I always have this image of a round table and men in armor and so on. But you have to come back and keep doing these demos. And we cooked up this rule that every time we went back, because there'd be like a host who had seen our demo and then some new partner, we made sure to have at least one new feature that would cost the one who'd seen it already at some point to like wake up and go, ooh, that's new, right? To give them the impression that we were moving at the speed of light, which we were, of course, but sometimes we'd actually deliberately not demo a feature in this meeting and hold it off to the next meeting. And 3 or 4 meetings in, one of the partners came into the room and he sat on the table, leaned over and he said, we want to invest in your company. We want to invest $2 million for 40% of the company, which by today's standards is a terrible, terrible deal, right? But in 2002, at the depth of the crises, it was an amazing deal, and it felt like this. You can see the direction it's pointing, right? So we finished our demos to all the partners, and in the end we got to like the head of the firm, who was like a storied, legend in VC land. I was going to say older gentleman, probably like the age I am now, and he was like completely asleep in the entire meeting. And then at the end, he woke up and asked really insightful, difficult questions. and I guess we answered them well enough that they continued wanting to invest. We got a lawyer here in California. I think that's missing in other ecosystems, that lawyers are willing to work on a contingency fee, where you only have to pay them if you close the round. So we found a lawyer like this when we were broke, right? And we hashed out some terms with Big Dog VC, and we asked our lawyer, can we get better? What's the angle to get better terms? And lawyer said, well, there's exactly one way to get better terms, which is to get other investors interested in investing in you. And the way to do that, well, one way to do that is to let me go to the bar and spread the rumor that Big Dog VC is interested in investing. Because then all the smaller VCs will also be interested in investing. And we didn't quite have the chutzpah to do that. And so we went to Big Dog VC and said, our lawyer says that he can go to the bar and spread the rumor. Are you okay with that? This really happened. And the guy laughed, just like that. He laughed and he said, oh, you can do that. And he had a word for it. He said, what you will experience is the blessing of Big Dog VC, that this really does work. Like, there are smaller VCs really do want to co-invest with us, and we're cool with that, whatever you want. You just have to be aware that we haven't made the investment yet. And if we decide not to, you will experience the curse of Big Dog VC, which is it's really hard to explain to those other guys if we don't invest why they should. Make your choice. And so, we flipped the coin. We didn't flip a coin. We went to a lawyer, said, do it. And suddenly, VCs were coming at us, hot and heavy. And we were like, for a brief 1-week period of time, was like the hot baby of Silicon Valley. And it felt great, I should not lie. Like, VCs were coming to us and explaining why we must have their money and how dangerous it would be if we only took money from, and it was great. And then a little side thing is another theory we developed with Big Dog is that every time we did a meeting, we would end it by asking, where are we in your funnel? Right, so VCs have funnels. These guys got 1,000 applicants a year, and at the time they made like 1 investment a month, right? And so they keep track of what % chance do you have? And we asked, and we'd go from the 0.1% to 10% to 25%. And when we'd hashed out the terms, we asked them if we sign or when we sign this term sheet, where are we at in your funnel? And to my surprise, they said 70%. I thought it would be like 95%, but only 70% of the investments that sign a term sheet actually get investment. And they explained why. They said in 1 out of 10 cases, the entrepreneur, when we do due diligence, we find they have misrepresented something, and we never talked to them again. Now, we knew that wasn't going to happen, so we were really at 80%. But then he explained that in 2 out of 10 cases, during due diligence, Big Dog would go to all their portfolio companies and casually talk about the subject at hand. And if they got the impression that one of their portfolio companies was too interested in that space, maybe working on something in that space, they would say no, generally speaking, because they didn't like to have competing companies in their portfolio, but also just because if it was a big portfolio company, your window might close and all this. You can obviously see where this is going, right? So like the day before we were scheduled to go sign the term sheet, Yahoo hadn't touched their map site for 4 years. launched a small but significant change to their map site. There was nothing like what we were proposing, but still enough that you felt this little, right? And then we got a call from Big Dog, and they were like, we got to talk. Did you see what Yahoo did? Yahoo was a portfolio company. Yes, but it's nothing like what we're easy. And the guy was just like, no, we're not investing. And they're very firm. They're very, polite but firm. One of the 12 partners had said no. And we never found out who it was. We didn't get to talk to the person. It was over. I still get a little, it's just really hurt. And then we experienced that curse, right? All the other VCs that had thought that's the hottest thing a few days earlier suddenly just like disappeared. And it was really over, and we were broke, and it was not good. Like this. And so we went from the height of the height to the depth of the depth, and I called Mom in tears. And I explained what happened, and she said, son, it's because there's something better waiting for you out there, she said, and I kept crying. But it turned out she was right, and so what happened was that 3 days later, we made 3 phone calls to the 3 people that had been the most bullish about what we did. Frank, of course, was one of them. He had this real estate company in his portfolio that he thought might buy us. We met with them, wasn't interesting. We met the partner at Big Dog that had originally proposed the investment, right? Because he was the one who liked us. And we said, what do you think? And he said, look, I cannot salvage this deal for you. It's really, truly over. I could probably find a few $100,000 from friends and so on, and you can see what we can do, but honestly, I think you can do better. And then this guy here, Ram Shimram. So we had just met Ram. He worked with Big Dog as a kind of business person they would add to a small team of only engineers like us. And he was going to sit on board, help us out, invest some money. He liked our demo. We called him. He said, look, I can't work with you if Big Dog isn't going to invest. I really work for them. But, and then the most impactful piece of business advice I've ever received, I think, said Ram, that the same reason Big Dog doesn't want to invest, namely that Yahoo is rumbling in your space, is going to make Google want to buy you. That's what he said. And then he said, I happen to sit on Google's board. Convenient little fact, right? And I can have you in front of Larry in a few days if you want to think about it, right? And we thought about it for about 3 seconds, and we were like, well, yes, please make the investment. And then a few days later, we went and we met Larry, and we showed him our demo. And a little backstory here. So like 20 years ago, web browsers were not that powerful, and everyone had sort of the same map site that had copied MapQuest. And one of our fundamental theses about maps was that you couldn't do any better because web browsers weren't powerful enough. And so what we had built was actually not a website at that time. It was a C++ application you would download and sit next to your web browser. And we had this whole idea of services that had geography embedded in them would make map sites instead of websites, and that was all of them. We had this cool demo. You could find a cinema and click on it, and you could go and buy the ticket right there on the map, and then find a nice pizza place afterwards. And we showed this to Larry, and Larry, he's a man of very few words and even fewer facial expressions, and we had no idea what he thought through the entire thing. And then in the end, he said, I like the way you think about maps, but Google is really a web company. Are you sure you can't make it on the web? This is long before Chrome. This is back when Internet Explorer was still king, right? And so we went home, and he walked out the door after saying this, right? And so we went home, and what I like to think of as a heightened state of motivation, broke, hungry, completely out of other options. We had the 3 most productive weeks of our lives, where we managed to disprove one of the fundamental theses of our company. We rewrote the entire thing in JavaScript, which is not really a thing back then. But in the depth of Internet Explorer, there was this thing called JavaScript, and we coded this up, and 3 weeks later, we kind of blew our own minds, to be honest, that we could do this in a browser. And then we rocked back up to Google. They assembled a bigger team this time, and we're like, hey, Larry, something like this you had in mind. We try to be calm about it, right? And I think they were impressed, and then they agreed to buy the company. And 9 months later, we launched it as Google Maps, which I'm really proud about. And I still, this has been 20 years, and I tell this story a fair bit, and I still can't believe that this really happened. But it did. And then we stayed on the Maps team for 2.5 years. Actually, so my brother, when we joined Google, my brother went back to his drawer of startup ideas, and he found a media one, right? One that required more resources and a bigger team. And he showed it to me. Again, I was immediately sold. And we agreed that we would stay on the Maps team until Google Maps was the #1 map site in the world. And there are these companies that track this, right? So we could look at the graph. And 2.5 years in, we became the #1 map site in the world at 80 million users. That's all it took back then. Right now, I think Google Maps is like 2 billion users now. And then we left. The Maps team, and we started on this project here. Who knows Google Wave? Thanks, guys. and this was very different in its start, right? So we pitched this to Google, and they of course loved us because we just created Google Maps. And they immediately, like, don't leave to do this as a startup. Here's $25 million, 60 engineers, office space, you can get anything you want, and sort of like a special project structure around us that had semi-autonomy. And we set out to build this thing. We spent a couple of years building a demo, and we started demoing to people at Google, and we did a big demo to like 5,000 geeks at the biggest conference Google does a year, got a standing ovation. And this article, I didn't write this myself. This is not ChatGPT. This really did appear, like the CNN sent a team to Denmark to interview my family and find this beautiful picture. This is me and my brother, and called us geniuses. and it looked really promising. Like, we got 4 million people signed up for our beta when we made that available. When we started inviting people to try it out, people were selling invitations on eBay for several $100s, and we frankly thought, you bought one of those? Oh, sorry, yes. I guess that's relevant. It was an attempt at making, like, everyone has email, and it's really the only communication mechanism on the internet that you can rely on everyone having. But the email is one of the oldest technologies on the internet. Like, it predates the web. And my brother had these ideas for modernizing it by combining a bunch of things that we'd learned over the decades of the internet to make a more robust, faster, more interactive communications. You can see why this went wrong, right? Because I can barely explain what it actually was, which was part of the problem. And so unfortunately, suddenly it just like blew up in our faces. And unfortunately, I don't have time to explain how it failed. But it was supremely painful. I should not lie to you. And one of the, if I can do this, someone actually asked me in one of my meetings earlier today, what's your key learning from this particular failure here? And we made quite a lot of different mistakes that I can identify now that the pain has subsided a little. Way too many to fix, right? But I think the main thing was really about, well, market fit, not surprising, right? So like my brother and I had worked on this together in very much the same way as the Maps thing. And the way we worked was that we were our own first users, that we were building the product that we wanted for that particular problem. And it turns out that our Maps project was successful, I think in part because we have no sense of direction. Like me in particular, like I'm the joke that keeps on giving to my friends, the Maps guy got lost again. Like I can get lost in my own apartment, and it's not a very big apartment. I really truly don't have a sense of direction here. And so the map tool that I need is very well aligned with the mass market, right? You have to get the basics, don't get me lost, get me to where I want to go, stuff right. Whereas Wave, which was a communications tool, So with communications, we're pretty good at this, if I can be modest. It's kind of what I do. Professionally, I communicate, I coordinate, I collaborate with highly technical teams spread around the world. And so the tool I need to be more efficient is super poorly aligned with the mass market. And we fell into this trap that all the people around us were just like us, right? And so everyone like loved it, standing ovations is the best thing ever. You're gonna totally change the world. And then when we had to do this thing, if you're familiar with the concept of crossing the chasm from those early adopters to a mass market, it just completely didn't work. I mean, people got very confused. And then there was some internal politics at Google we can talk about another day that were poorly timed, and it ended up like this. And we're also running out of time a little bit. But I did manage to pull out a little bit of success from this, because although the product didn't succeed in the marketplace, the team we assembled was truly world-class, like 60 of the best engineers you could imagine, all in Australia. And right as I was leaving Google after this, I met this angel investor, Bill Tai, who is always flying in the air on his kite surfing. He's the kind of person you can't talk to him about anything without it ending up being about kite surfing. And I'd met him in Australia. I'd done an investment in a different company that he was on the board of. And he introduced me to this handsome young couple who had pitched him an idea to build a new graphics design tool to compete with Adobe. And Bill had met, they're from Perth, Australia, a mining town in Western Australia, not the kind of place you would expect startup founders to come out of. And Bill, who went there because I have a good kite surfing beach, he called me up and he's like, these guys, they have something. I don't know, they have a vision that's interesting, but they're not techies. She's a graphics designer, he was a business student, and they didn't have a tech team. And so Bill wrote to both of us, Melanie and me, that if Lars can find you a tech team he signs off on, I will invest. And she was making the rounds to VCs and got like more than 100 no's from VCs, right? The only sort of yes you had was from Bill saying, if Lars can do this for you, then I will invest. And so she had every incentive to hunt me down, which she did. And in a year or so, we managed together to first recruit this handsome gentleman here. So he was the UI designer on the Google Wave team, and a truly like world-class designer, both in terms of like making beautiful designs, but he was so productive. We only had one UI designer on a team of 60 engineers, and he was always ahead of the engineers. It was crazy. And also a published programmer. Like he's published books about programming user interfaces, and so often when he delivered his design to the engineers, it was already programmed. All the interactions were already programmed in JavaScript. And I managed to help Melanie to persuade Cameron to join their little company. And then after he joined, this also very handsome engineer, PhD out of Queensland in Australia. Oh, this is a funny story here. So like after Cam joined, Dave, who was still at Google, was very easy to persuade to join. And so he went to Google and said, I'm going to join this little startup that Lars is working with. And Google 5x'd his salary overnight. Like both cash and stock, right? Just to keep him around, he was that good. And he was sad Dave, he called me up and said, Lars, I can't say no to that. My desk is too much money, I can't say no. This was sad Dave, right? And I thought, oh, well, we lost Dave, but Melanie, who's not a giving upper, she wrote a 25-page graphical novel. This is one of the slides, right? About Dave and his wanderlust and desire to change the world. And then Lars came and sent him over to Canva, and then evil Google came and gave him handcuffs. And then in the end, it ends like this. Save Dave. This was the entire Canva team at the time. And he changed his mind again. And now he's the CTO of this company. This is us kite surfing on a beach in Hawaii, I think. So now Canva is like a $30 billion company. Dave is a CTO, Cameron is a CPO, both teams. And a lot of their kind of middle management and engineering were people from the Wave team. I just wanted to show you this, another example, much prettier, of course, because it's made by Canva. And you can see Bill is the Frank here, and I'm sort of the second level down there. But again, almost everything that happened in the early days of Canva all started with this one guy, where 100 other VCs turned them down, and he built this tree for them. And 40 billion, amazing. That's what we do now, by the way, Alumni. We invest. This is from just yesterday, when we went to San Francisco and we got in a driverless car to take us to a satellite factory that we happen to have been a first investor in, as they're called Astron, and they make fridge-sized geostationary satellites cheaper, better, faster than the other guys. And we're like, maybe San Francisco is really the future when we had that day. And tomorrow we're going back to Athens. So thanks again for inviting me, and thanks so much for the award. It's beyond flattering. And that's my story.
So we have time for a few questions, if anybody.
So I've heard that you originally said you had a lot of failures in the beginning, preceding to your Google Maps success. So I'm just wondering, what is the I guess the most important takeaway you can have from those failures?
Yeah, well, so actually a lot of my failures came after Google Maps as well, and so a single lesson. I don't know, keep trying, I guess. I mean, I think this thing I was trying to illustrate with this tremendous failure of Wave, and I can make fun of it now, but it really hurt because I thought it was going to be a success, and it was so public. That demo we did at I/O was watched 10 million times, and we were all over the news. And there was actually this one year where in the same year we won several most promising startup awards and shittiest thing ever invented awards. It's like the Oscars and the Razzies. I don't know if it's, but it was really painful, right? But once you recover from it, you can still pull out not just lessons, but really actual material, valuable things. I would not have met those Canva founders, or more to the point, I would not have been able to help them if I didn't have that sense. So part of me thinks I should do a lot of these and assemble great teams and have it completely fail, and then go and recruit those people into startups that I can invest. That's a joke, but it really is about someone famous said something like, success is to stumble from failure to failure without giving up hope, or something like that. And that's sort of how I feel. In 10 years, I'll be giving talks where instead of maps and Canva, it'll be maps and Canva and some other thing that I may be doing very soon.
Why is it necessary to keep Big Dog's identity confidential?
So this is the weirdest thing, actually. I love Big Dog. I love the way they handle the situation. I love every interaction with them. If I ever have a chance of pitching them a startup, I would be all over that, and I often send startups there. For some weird reason, no matter how many times I say that and I praise them, because it's quite likely, this is very hypothetical, right, that I would have been another shipwreck if they had invested, right? That really did require this marriage with Google to work out. But for some reason, this notion that there was a term sheet and they didn't sign it, no matter how I tell that, they see that, I think, as a criticism. And once I had this very strange experience of a journalist, I think the 10-year anniversary of Google Maps, was interviewing me, and I'm telling this delightful story, and then she went and called Big Dog. And they were like, that never happened. that was awkward. It really did happen. I did not make this up. But they would not confirm the story. And so therefore, I don't mention their names. But they're unbelievably amazing people.
Thank you, Lars, for a great story. So, I mean, we're in the center of startup world, right? So I'm very curious. You make it almost sound very humble, like it was serendipity. You lucked out meeting Frank and then the other guy. But obviously there is something in you that makes you meet these people. So if you were trying to attribute it to yourself and congratulate yourself and give yourself credit, like what would it be that made you stumble into all these great people?
Right. Deep childhood traumas are a great motivational factor. I'm not sure. My dad was kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit, and I like to say that he was a journalist, and he was a very, very good journalist, kind of award-winning journalist, but he lacked the skill of working for other people, which I have possibly inherited from him, and so he went out on his own and built a company, and so I kind of got to see the joy of that before it completely went bust and bankrupted the family, and it ended really poorly, and so I don't know if that's why my brother and I really want to do this entrepreneurial thing.
I have a question. What are the top questions that you like to ask startup founders before you could invest in them?
That's a good question. Okay, so what do I like to ask startup founders? So I think a couple of things. When it comes to subject matter, Ella, so we invest together, right? We've tried a couple of times writing down these are the things we're interested in. And every time we tried that, our next investment has always been outside of that defined space. And so we're not particularly into certain technologies, right? But I do think when I look back at it, we have maybe 100 investments now, right? When I look back at each of them, they have some personal, there's something that captures us about the problem they're trying to solve. And actually the Canva thing, when we were undergraduates, my brother and I, our programming experience was for a graphical design company before Mac. So when they actually built this custom computer and you could do graphical design on it. And I think Google Maps' success had a lot to do with how we knew how to make things look good on a screen. So the maps were pretty easy to read. And when Melanie came to us with this vision, it just kind of immediately triggered something in us. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that this is not a question per se, but this is more like a vibe thing, right? So we think of angel investing half jokingly, but only half jokingly, as buying a ticket to hang out with cool people solving interesting problems. And so one of the criteria, of course, is that we have to really enjoy working with them. And that's a very hard to define thing, but it's much easier when you get this kind of a luxury with Canva, with Mel and Cliff, that we actually worked together for a whole year before that even was around to invest in. And so by then I knew that these were amazing people to work with. And I actually continued after we got those two guys, and Bill invested and I invested, and all his kite surfing investing buddies invested. And I continued actually working as kind of their lead recruiter for a while, which was tons of fun. And of course, there should be some notion that the solution that they were proposing jives with the problem and so on. And now, so we're kind of in a period 3 years in, trying to make this our main gig. We're trying to reevaluate a little bit. Is this fulfilling? Is that we're having an impact on the world and so on? And what is it about the successes in our portfolio? Can we try and tease out in hindsight kind of thing? And there is not a lot, to be honest. I wonder how good we really are at this and how lucky we just are. But the only thing that really consistently seems to work is when someone on the founding team is someone I've worked with, like these two guys, right? If either of them were going to found any startup, I would invest. I would let them tell me what they're working on, but I would make the decision beforehand. Don't tell them that will go to their head. Yes.
So you got a PhD from Berkeley, from EECS, and I'm wondering, does your PhD experience have in retrospect, would you do this PhD if you will be end up in this startup journey? And how does, if yes, how does the skill you acquired or experience you acquired during this PhD process help to shape your future careers? Thanks.
Okay, that's an excellent but slightly too hypothetical question. I have thought about this a lot, and I have not come up with any answers to that. But I think just for me as a person, that PhD, not so much the degree and everything, but like having gone through that and discovered an algorithm that Alistair teaches in his classes, that's a tremendous amount of joy for me in itself. And like I was trying to say earlier, there's part of me that feels like, wow, I should have stuck with that. Like I should have gone this way instead, and maybe it wouldn't have made me so much money or whatever, but I think I don't see the two things as being deeply connected. It was more like I did that thing and then life took me in a different direction. I do think like the dynamic between my brother and I, where he's the dropout with the out-of-the-box thinking, and I do have some formal training and some experience and so on, that's a good combination to have on a founding team. But that's very unique to my specific situation.
One more question? Or somebody? Okay, well, we pretty much out of time anyway, so let's thank Lars again for inspiring us. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Likewise. Now I can relax. Hi, baby. Thank you for coming, baby.